this is a raging party today. There's an election, okay, yeah. Oh, is that really? I wasn't aware, not in here. Well, look, thank you, folk, for being here, and it's tremendous. Good to see Fiona, welcome. I've seen you down there, and we've got Murray also from Grant Thornton, along with staff. It's tremendous to have you here for what is a reasonably functional but still important meeting with some key matters, which I'm grateful, Andrea, that you've brought to the committee, which is tremendous. So, look, why don't we centre ourselves on this meeting and join me, please, in the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tā rātara ki hai, e hi ake ane ta arakura, he tio, he hoka, he hohu, he moriora. Thank you. So look, we've got a couple online. Mia Tori, I hope you're feeling better on those at the back. You said you put out, and Iona, I do wish you well as you get over that cold. Watch it. There is that sort of nasty bug which was around earlier, seems to have resurrected itself around the place. So great to have you two here, even if you're slightly indisposed. And as I've said before, encourage your participation as and when you feel fit, which is great. So look, with that, I don't think we need to sustain any apologies, Tian, but we'll take it as that we are fine and all here. Are there any matters coming up that your interests should be noted for? I doubt it. Annual report is probably, okay, there we go. So that gives us then the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of May. And I'll move from the chair that we take those as true and correct. Do we have a seconder? Thank you for that. That's right. Sorry, is there any discussion? Is there any matters of items of correction or anything like that? Okay, please take your remotes and vote, please. Brilliant. How does Iona do it? How does she do it? Chat. On chat. Oh, okay. Oh, brilliant. And Tori? Yes, there we go. Tori, thank you, Tori. Okay, that's passed. Let's move on to a couple of other procedural matters. There aren't any other items that we should be discussing today, Andrea, that you don't want to bring. I certainly don't either, and I don't think, Tian, we've got any indication of public participation. So that does get us to the annual report. Tony, as I said before the meeting, thank you for chairing the first round of our meetings, workshops, which I was unable to attend. So repeat my apology, but I understand that there's now demands that you be chaired because you're so efficient and fast, which is great. But we probably will spend a wee bit more time on the annual report now that we've got a bit more here. So I'm open, and we've also, Baz, are you coming up for this, Fiona? I wonder whether it would be good if you could come up too, please. Karina?
Karina's not quite here.
I'm going to say Karina's not here. Getting Liz's coffee. Oh, okay. Oh, radio. That's tremendous.
She'll join us.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. So, Baz, you're going to lead off?
Yes, I can introduce the report. Look, we can largely take it as read, but I will kind of highlight some of the key points that I think are worth noting. So what it is, this is a progress or an update report in terms of how we're going on the annual report. This is also the third time that we've come to talk to you about this. So obviously on the 7th of May, we came and talked through the audit plan as well as the pro formas. And then last week we had a workshop session where we talked through Volume 1. And Volume 1 is in essence the narrative of the annual report as well as the performance, so the non-financial performance, if you like. So this is an update, a progress update. What I can tell you is that everything's, in very simple terms, is progressing very, very well. It is very tight. I do want to reiterate that. So normally we adopt at the end of October. Because of the elections, we're trying to adopt at the end of September. So we've lopped a whole month off our annual report timeframe in terms of preparing it. that's a lot harder than you think it is. And so we're accounting not just for days, but for hours within days in terms of getting it across the line. And there is still some residual risk in that as well. At the moment, and you can speak to Fiona yourself separately, but at the moment things appear to be tracking well. We're all very organised and putting our best foot forward in that regard. So the next steps after this meeting is on the 23rd. There is a workshop on the financials. The 25th is when this committee reconvenes and receives Volume 1 and Volume 2, so the full annual report, and hopefully we'll have a verbal confirmation in terms of where we're at in terms of the audit at that point in time, and then of course sign out at the end of September. Last thing for me to point to is the non-financial performance. Talked a little bit about this last week, so I won't go through it in the same level of detail that we did last week, but in essence we're sitting at, I think, 68% in terms of 118 KPIs. Difficult to compare to previous years where we were at 60% because we've got slightly different KPIs because we've got a new LTP. Of course, this is year one of the first of the 24 LTP. We've also changed the threshold, so it's actually a little bit harder to achieve this time around. So I think overall, I think heading in the right direction. It's a good trend as far as I can see. So I'll leave it there, just noting that there's still one KPI to come in, which is greenhouse gas emissions. So that's due in a couple of weeks' time. So that's still to come through. But I'll leave it there and I'll hand over to Karina, who can talk through the financial side of things.
I'll largely take the paper as read, and Baz has already spoke to a lot of the progress and where we are tracking. In terms of the financial statements, we have provided to Audit last Monday the first draft of the parent numbers. There's some kind of placeholders, some very small couple of notes, and then we're currently working on the group financial statements with the group numbers, and they're at the internal review stage. So they've been drafted, we're just doing a thorough review, and then we'll be looking to hand a full set back to Audit at the back end of next week, incorporating any of their feedback. I'm sure Fiona will speak to it, but we understand the audit is progressing well, and our teams have provided all the information we've needed to and are prioritising audit queries as we get them. This year there was a bit of a change with the pre-final audit at the end of June. This was a really positive change with the Audit New Zealand coming in and actually looking at some of our external revaluation reports. And also as part of this pre-final audit, we had provided Audit with some supporting memos for topical areas, and that was in addition to the pro forma financial statements that we presented at this committee in May. There's one paper we're still waiting to hear back from, and that is the treatment of the digitised property archive records. So they're in the financial statements now, but pending where that lands, these numbers may or may not move, so they are very much the numbers we have now, the unaudited versions. And as Baz mentioned, bit of a change from last year. This year we will be having the briefing on the financial statements just before the next audit committee meeting. So at that point you'll actually have the full statements with you, and we will then present and guide you through those numbers and point out the key areas of judgments and assumptions to help you review them.
That'll be brilliant, Karina, and I appreciate that briefing comes close to our actual formal meeting, and it's the compressed time scale that we've got. So I just wonder, committee, if you could just turn to page 16 of the agenda, because this is where I'd probably like to bring you in, Fiona. We have the actual dates that we're all working to. It's always good to see it on the table in front of you, just as to where things are going. So at the moment we're hearing things are basically trucking on, but Fiona, it would be good to hear your view. Fiona rang me last night just to give me an update as to where things are at. Thank you for that, Fiona. I do appreciate that. But I wonder, Fiona, if you could give some sense of what you told me yesterday, because I think it would be important for all of us to hear.
We are on track. We're probably having to just manage some staff sickness because we have had a little bit of staff sickness, and as Baz alluded to, every day in our accounts at the moment. So that is probably reprioritising some things to make sure that significant things are done first, bringing forward the valuation work, and even starting some of the greenhouse gas inventory work is going to assist us in meeting those timeframes. but it is still be really tight. I think I'm on track to give you some feedback on the financials by the end of this week, but I am going to the local government conference, so I've just got to figure out how I'm going to do that. Maybe with we have a peer reviewer. I'm hoping he'll be able to give me his initial comments on the parents as well. So from that side of things, we feel relatively comfortable on track. I had a catch up with the team. There's no issues that they're coming across now. Anything that I've identified from my review, I'm just sort of asking them to fast track it. So investment properties and that assets held for sale thing is something that I'm just getting them to concentrate on. So we're trying to deal with things that way, so we're not getting any last minute things popping up. As Karina alluded to, we are waiting for some technical advice to come back. And I did speak to the reviewer of that yesterday, so she's hoping to get that back to me by the end of this week, which will be on track for the feedback on the 5th. In terms of any opinion impacts, local water's done well. We're just going through the disclosure that Karina's sent through. There's potentially going to be an emphasis of matter in relation to that, and that will be just to direct the reader of the accounts to where those disclosures are, because there will be a lot of uncertainty around that area. The Three Waters fair value assessment, again, that would expect an emphasis of matter, and that's sitting with technical. They'll probably want to look at the whole opinion all as one rather than just coming back to us in bits on that. But that's updated wording, and again, it'll just be alluding to those disclosures. And the other area that we've got to work through in relation to that is the greenhouse gas Scope 3 emissions and the impact for last year's comparatives, and if there's an impact this year, just around the reliability of the information. I think that's what it was really going to come down to, and whether the best information, and will be an EOM regardless, because all greenhouse gas disclosures get EOMs and all the annual reports, but it's just what it says, but it's whether we have to keep the qualification from last year. The qualification, I don't want to say it's been removed for the complaints measures, but when we assessed the measures that we thought were the key measures, we removed that from our priority as a key measure, so therefore the qualifications that were there last year will not be included in the audit report for this year, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Fiona.
If you've got any questions, I think that would probably
I think that would be good at this stage before we get into the actual draft information we have in front of us, just so about process and indeed about audit queries. Any questions from my colleagues? Can I ask, what's the uncertainty around local water's done well, given the decisions we've made?
It's just around the valuation of
the assets. Yeah, so it's the balance sheet
concern
impact.
assumptions, and it's as it's a sector issue, we're getting sector guidance which is due this week, I understand. So, and your disclosure has currently been reviewed against that guidance, but it hasn't.
Is there a sectoral level approach to the valuation of the assets?
I'm not sure.
I'm perhaps looking more at Andrew. Or somebody that's involved, actually.
Yeah, so for the process that we are following is that all of the councils that are going into Metro Water, which is the holding name for the Waters a council-controlled organisation, will be undertaking a full valuation at 31 May 2026. Yeah. And so we've used 31 May because that's a reasonable proximity to 30 June, which would be the transfer date. We're working with all of our colleagues across the neighbouring councils, or I should say we, I mean, it's Karina that is working across. I'm doing very little work on that space.
The royal we.
The royal we. So Karina's very much involved in that process. Yeah. The other thing I would note is Karina has very much led and the team have very much led some of the disclosure work on the Three Waters, and we've been sharing those with our neighbouring councils. So we're all collaborating on that quite comprehensively.
Yes, I mean, thank you. I mean, that's consistency amongst the members of the Metro Water. Always more interested to know whether there was any sort of national guidance, as there has been in the past with things like electricity reform. So we'll wait and see. Yeah, Ray.
Regarding the local water done well, I actually still feel very uncomfortable about the way that the division between the voting partners and Wellington's part in that, because we are putting in significant investment into this, but if we only get one vote out of 7, then...
Ray, sorry, can I just be rude? There is a bit of feeling that we are asking about the disclosures that will occur in the annual report, not the actual issue of any decision that you've made past or in the future about how you enter into Wellington Water. So I wonder if this is the appropriate place for that question.
Okay.
Perhaps you'd like to withdraw it. Any other questions or comments? Rightio. Fiona, just the only other thing then was in paragraph 36 of our paper, Baz, on page 13, you really set out the full range of full valuations and fair valuations process that we're going through here. We're basically, what I'm hearing is we're basically okay over those in terms of particularly fair valuations. We haven't suddenly found ourselves having to do a full revaluation, and indeed the revaluations themselves are ones that we are basically on top of, including with the auditors, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So in terms of the fair valuations, they were for our water assets,
Yeah.
and we've concluded that there was no material movement, so they are appropriate still to use. We've also done the same for operational land and buildings. This is because year 2 of the 3-year cycle, and again we have concluded, along with CBRE, there's no material movement. The 3 revaluations we did do is investment properties is what we do annually.
Yeah.
And in that space, the portfolio itself, what we've done, and this is what Fiona was alluding to earlier, is the ground leases that the council during the year have approved to be put up for sale. They've now moved out of that portfolio to non-current assets held for sale, so there is a drop in the portfolio overall for that movement to non-current assets held for sale. And we also did the roading revaluation and infrastructure land, and they've all, I think from audit, there's no
I don't have any concerns over them. I think it's just the roading one. There is just some work that we need to do around testing the underlying information, which I'm not really expecting any issues with. And we've just had some they're doing a more centralised process around unit rates for both 3 waters and for roading, and those rates for the roading only just came out late last week, so we're just going to have to do just a little bit of
this is the June update to the indices. Yeah, okay. Good. The reason I asked that question, by the way, Karina, is that going back to your audit plan, this is the critical thing, and we don't, and actually the massive time burner for reasons that we've all experienced in the past. So that's good to know that's in hand, Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Can you just tell me what's the difference between a fair valuation and a full valuation? Is one a guesstimate?
So for the fair value assessment, so last year, say for roading, we did a fair value assessment. It generally just looks at the cost indices, and it does it as an overall group.
That's the full valuation.
Just a fair value update. And the purpose of that is just to check, is the fair value based on just indexing, like cost movements, is it materially the same as what you're already reporting?
So they're assumptions.
Yes, yeah. And then when we do the full revaluation, the valuers actually go into a lot more detail and look at assets, sometimes line by line, and they will actually go out and look at assets, and they will put in their useful life assumptions as well as just the cost. So the fair value update's mostly just around cost indices, and the full revaluation looks at everything to do with the assets, including useful life, if they've got any assumptions on the conditioning of the assets as well.
So before the handover, to Metro Water, we will have a full valuation of the water infrastructure and assets.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
And that's what Andrea was referring to, Liz, about the 31 May 2026.
Yeah.
There will be a full revaluation.
And then 30 June we hand it over. Okay, gee, it's a lot of work. You guys are doing all right?
Yep, no, it's going to be a busy year. Don't get away from that. Okay, look, that's really useful. And Karina, I know you're over the top of it. It was clear in the paper. I was just keen to know that Fiona, as our auditor, is also comfortable that we aren't needing to do more work around the valuations, which is fine. Okay. Well, now's the time to look at. Don't go away, Baz. Nice try, or perhaps you want to. Now's the time to actually look at the appendices that you've given us. Now, I am conscious, I'm looking at it for the first time, and you folk have had a reasonable crack at parts of this last week. Is there anything in particular that I would like to go through about 8 points, which are higher principle points, not detail, but I just wonder whether there's any sort of lead that you want to give us in terms of considering the two appendices, which are obviously draft one plus the statements of service performance.
No, I won't go through it in any level of detail. In essence, we're following very much a pattern from last year.
Yeah.
Obviously, Appendix 2, which is the performance information, will be integrated into Volume 1, down the line. That'll be available, obviously, on the 25th of September. But in essence, we're taking it as read. We talked about the themes at the workshop last week. And we're just happy to answer questions and just go through it chapter by chapter.
Well, look, committee members, I'm going to preach at you now. I would really think the first sort of what I call roughly 60 pages are the key for your accountability to the community. So I have focused on that. I understand the framework and the thinking around the service performance, and I'm not going to go over that because I think you've done more or less that last week. So I think the Appendix 1, which has the broad lead that you are giving the community in terms of accountability is key. So if folk would like, I sense that probably I've got my questions, but do any burning questions from the committee first, if they would? Okay, well, look, forgive me if there's one or two that you've covered last week, and if that's the case, just tell me to butt out, and I will. This is quite a confronting read. This is a brutally honest report on what we have and haven't achieved.
Yeah, so we've got, it's a good observation and it's a fair observation, and I think, we've always had the mantra of honest accounting as part of our annual report process, and we've had that for a long period of time. And this year is no different. And so that is what the requirement is you talk about your performance, and that is the good, but also the bad, right?
Yeah.
And that is what you have to do. And only from doing that can you actually understand your performance, your true performance, and then, of course, make change as a consequence. So, yes, it is an honest accounting, but that's what's required, and we are happy with what's there.
Good. Look, thank you for that, and I would totally support that. You'd expect that probably from my background, Baz. I want to reflect to you councillors, this is a brutal report. I use that word deliberately on where we're at and not at, what we've achieved and what we have not achieved.
Can I ask you, Bruce, to be more specific?
Well, if
because,
you've read the performance and you've read the themes, and they're not holding back on what are the challenges this community faces and what the council faces.
I guess maybe it's because we are doing all of the work that kind of goes through. It doesn't. Honestly, to read it, it didn't read.
It was interesting.
It didn't hit that way for me, and maybe because we're involved, embedded in the decision making that sits behind all of this information every day. So I'm interested in more of. Yeah,
we could go through it page by page, but I think what I'm trying to reflect here, certainly as an external reader and first up, there is a level of clarity about the challenges that we face that actually is strong in its merit, but it is in some sense a confronting read. It fits the vibe that Wellington is challenged. That's interesting, which then gets me to my question, which is the theme, the one footprint, the whakatauki. I was trying to work out how does this fit within this report. I've got it as one column on page 21, but to me, that's the positive, that it's saying we're challenged, but we are going to do something one step at a time. How has that influenced the nature of the reporting? because that's what I guess I don't quite get that theme and how it should influence our reporting to the community.
Right.
Maybe, by the way, sorry, I don't.
Hi, I'm Joss Anton.
Joss.
The whakatauki was chosen because we recognised that we're in a difficult year, and we were thinking about how we could relate the fact that with all the challenges that the council are encountering, that we are still doing our job. And that we are still delivering. And sometimes things might be a bit slow, but actually we're still getting there. But we wanted to relay the fact that there is the difficulty there, that we are facing the challenges, but that we are still continuing one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I think we probably have, my opinion, because I've been part of the authoring, I think we've actually been able to relay that. We have been. I agree with you that there's some very brutal aspects about the report, and one of them particularly is the fact that we've been facing an awful lot of external negativity, which has had an impact on people within the organisation. So we have been quite honest about that. We feel that that's an important message to relay.
Yeah.
But we're also reporting the fact that despite this, we are doing our job, that we are still continuing our job and we are still delivering. So that's really where the whakatauki come from.
So I don't have any trouble with this. I want to stress, I have no trouble with the whakatauki.
Yep.
And actually, I'm looking for the wee bit of hope.
Yes.
What are the steps that you are taking? Perhaps that's the point I'm.
Okay.
Perhaps that's the point I'm making, Joss. It didn't as an easy read. Sorry, as a read, it didn't come through what those small steps were, or those one steps that you take at a time, which I think is a great theme in the face of significant change. I was just looking for, probably in each of the areas, what is that one step that we're taking? So I've got the challenges, I've got the clarity, the honesty, and I've got to be careful. This is not a marketing.
No,
I know that.
Enough. Okay.
What is the, what is the next step? What's the one step, etc. That's what I was looking for in reading this, particularly this front part, which after all is what will dominate our headlines and our talking with the community.
I think from the non-financial performance perspective, one of the steps that we're taking is that we are being more honest with the way we're reporting, and we are showing showing a greater level of accountability with our reporting, and we're doing okay in that space. We have been clearer about some of the challenges that we've had, for example, with the consenting and the external advice, and we're showing that, yes, we've got this, and this is what we're doing about it. So perhaps we just need to lift up the bits that we've done, we're doing well.
But can I perhaps add a comment in here? I think Bruce, your reflection is well made, and I think what we will do is we'll go away and we'll just take a lens to the report with that. I think one of the key things that I would observe in this is that largely this is about where the council is at, and we are about to embark in the next 12 months opening some significant buildings like Te Matapihi, our central library, which has been handed back to the council a couple of weeks ago, and now in fit-out stage, like the town hall. The significant progress being made on the sludge minimisation facility. There's a large number of other pieces of work coming to an end, and of course, City to Sea Bridge, we've got clarity on that as of last night. And those things, that's still a component of our 2021 long-term plan, and we are seeing that sort of culminate in the year ahead. And I think we can incorporate some commentary around that, because that was the debate that we had in setting the whakatauki right at the very beginning for the year. So I think we'll just add a wee bit more commentary on that just to encompass that. I'm sorry, just Bears, I'm conscious, and thank you, I'm conscious in this that we don't have the Mayor's report or the Chief Executive's report, and that's obviously a key area where you might bring out, a sort of a highlight of the these sorts of things, Andrea. So I am conscious in saying that I was perhaps looking for a more clearer link back to the whakatauki as I went through
the themes, the priorities, which, are there and well expressed. Baz? And then Rebecca.
I was just going to reflect back to what you said right at the start in terms of how it's positioned. I think if you look through the performance results, and what we're trying to show is an honest accounting, that's what I said right at the start, and you will see that actually the performance across a whole range of our services is actually exceptionally high. And that, that does come through, and if it doesn't come through strongly enough, then that's kind of feedback that I want to understand. So if you go through lots of the common services, or the services that are frequently used by many of our residents, whether that's swimming pools or parks, or whether it's playgrounds, the service level is high, and the performance results show that. So there's high levels of satisfaction and performance in those spaces. So yes, we have got challenge areas, and we are being very honest about those, and we're not shirking those, because it's not a marketing document, right? It's not a CV. It's not designed like that, and we're open about that. But I do want to counter the term brutal that you use, that there is actually also lots of areas of quite high performance, as well as challenge areas.
Okay, sorry, Rebecca. I must confess, Iona apparently had her hand up first. I'll just ask Iona first, then I'll ask you. Iona, and then Liz.
Oh, thanks, Bruce. And I won't be long because I've got a big headache. I guess I'm one of those councillors who wants to do lots, but we're sort of getting a 68% success rate. And obviously we've just gone through an LTP process twice. Do officers think we need to look at decreasing, so that, because I would hope we would be getting about 80% success?
So the KPIs are set through the LTP. I asked this question actually of Jocelyn this morning in terms of how that compares across other local authorities across New Zealand. It's actually very hard to do benchmarking because everyone does do it very differently. What I would say is that there is a bit of stretch in there. So yes, you could set different targets and set different levels of service, and it would be easier to achieve. But the reality is this is where we've set them as part of the LTP, and this is where they've come in at.
Thanks for that. Rebecca.
I guess I sort of come back and I think I'm sort of echoing what Baz has said. I'm a little bit taken aback by your analysis, Bruce, and I think there is a balance to be struck in our conversation, and that's kind of why I asked you to be a bit more specific, because this is not a marketing document. However, I don't want to add to actually an unfair negative perception of our organisation and our performance, because for me, reading this report, there wasn't anything surprising in there, and that yes, it has been a relatively tough year, and there are some external circumstances, as the Crown Observer has noted, that add to an unfair scrutiny and focus on Wellington City Council, as opposed to the rest of the local government sector, who face nearly all of the same challenges and issues that we are in terms of infrastructure, and I'm a little bit perplexed by your approach, Bruce, and I guess I feel somewhat differently, and not to have a kind of a rose-tinted kind of view of. However, I'm not sort of surprised, and I didn't see the report with the level of like anything like using a word like brutal. I don't view it in that way at all. So if we, maybe when we come back to when we have the discussion next time, I would love it if you would be a little bit like more targeted in your comments to identify what particular things that you were of concern.
I'd certainly be happy to do that, Rebecca. And I think the critical thing here is reading the first 60 pages, where indeed things like residents' perception and surveys reflect a decreasing level of satisfaction, and we have been very honest about that. And I want to be.
They're mixed actually. Some are improving, some are decreasing.
I want to be want to be clear that I applaud the transparency. Now, I have read it in a certain way, and I'm very open, and I'd love to see the whole report, because we've seen it in pieces. But having said that, that front 60 pages does reflect a lot of challenges. Now, I do accept, Rebecca, that in the middle of all of this, in the way that you've said, Andrea, there are lots of things that are being taken, and probably if I was to see it slightly rebalanced, I don't mean remarketed, but rebalanced with what are the steps that are in front, I would get a stronger sense of actually what you're arguing, Rebecca, which is Bruce, you're a bit black hatting here, and I'd take that on. I'll take that one on board, and for lack, But having said that, I've just read this as an external, just totally fresh. So, if anything, Rebecca, I've achieved what I need to do, which is saying, is this reflecting the performance that you can relate to? That's all I'm trying to say. Is if you feel it's balanced as the members who are recommending this to your council as your accountability, that's fine. Because in the long run, I come back to exactly what you've said, Baz, is a commitment to being transparent and honest. Okay, Liz.
Yeah. Well, that was really interesting to hear everybody's view. But what I want to thank you for is both officers, all of yous, is that I think it's really good to hear your view and the lens that you saw it through, Bruce. Brutal. The level of clarity and Wellington being challenged. I think those are all fair comments, but what I'm really pleased to hear is the balance that we're going to do is tell a bit more of the good stories, and the fact that we don't have the Mayor or the Chief Executive's report in there. Yeah. Those are key points that I think will balance it out. But what I wanted to talk to was the question that you asked, how you're matching the whakatauki into the report. And thank you, Jocelyn. I thought that was a great explanation, but I just wanted to expand a bit further about why I think that your whakatauki is a really good choice, is that the things that you've raised, that things are a challenge and you're still doing the things. But what I really like is that we're not giving up. We're not giving up, and we're doing it one step at a time. And I just think that the view that you've taken to be so transparent and to be clear is what is needed in this current climate, because Councillor Matthews is quite correct in saying that Wellington City Council has been targeted unfairly, and the level of scrutiny that we have had on us here is unfair. And I just think that all the things that were raised here are good. And that if we can just balance it out with what you've said, because, when you say all of the things that we're doing, we've got a library that we're opening, we've got the sludge thing, we've got the town hall, we've got all of these things. What I always say where I live in Porirua is that, yes, the rates that I'm paying in Wellington have gone up. They've actually caught up with Porirua now. But the difference is that in Wellington, things are happening. We are doing things. It might be one step at a time, but we are doing things. Whereas in Porirua, I've lived there all my life, and for years and years, we've paid really high rates, but we get nothing. In fact, all we've got for the last long time is that our services just keep getting cut and our rates keep going up. So I think, we've got disgruntled ratepayers in Wellington because they have caught up with Porirua rates. And I'm one of them because I have a property in Wellington. I am happy that things are still happening here, but thank you for doing your job, being really clear about it and transparent, and letting everybody out there know what the staff here are working with, what the councillors around the table are working with. Sounds like a bit of a campaign thing, but I'm not running for anything. But I wanted to thank you, Bruce, for raising what you did. And now I'm going to go and read the thing again and look at it through the same lens.
Well, that's the key thing. Sorry, I'm not suggesting you haven't read it, but I am just wanting
with a different
you to
lens.
reflect with a slightly different lens.
But if I could just finish with that, I think that's the value of having an external person at the table. They bring a different lens and a different degree of scrutiny to the table.
Thank you, Liz. Tony, I think you would like to raise a point.
Yeah, look, thanks, Bruce. This is a little more of a debate than I thought we were going to have on this. But thank you for, I guess, raising this and challenging this. Look, this council is very challenged, and we're in a city that's challenged as well. And this report reflects that, I think, rightly reflects that. As a councillor, that we're continuously coming and having meetings, trying to balance things through. And to be honest, you get used to it. And your reminder that from an outside point of view, we are actually a very challenged city, struggling with debt, struggling to balance the affordability decisions. And this report reflects, I think, a lot of this reality. So good on you guys. Hui Cowley, you mentioned, yes, things are coming along, the library, sludge, town hall, sure. But these are all projects that have run majorly over cost, over original budgets. And so, that's part, yes, we're delivering them, but we're not delivering them on the basis of what the original decision when we decided to go ahead was made. And that's part of the challenge that we're facing. Some of the important indicators, and the word I'd pick up from that you said, Bruce, was confronting. I think that's good. It's good that people know that where we're at. This is the mirror, the big mirror that we hold up to see how we've done, and to give a very broad coverage. Sure, it's actually quite dry. It's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, but the comprehensiveness is good and important, and I know it takes a lot of work to pull that out. So I thank you for all of that. Thanks, Bruce, for your comments, and I look forward to, because I think what's reflected in here and what Bruce said in the first 60 pages, yes, that's what we're used to, but that doesn't mean that we're not. We still need to do better, and we still need to know how close to the edge we're continuing to run. So thanks.
Thanks there, Tony. I'm conscious that we're probably getting into debate now. One of the critical things that we're doing here is to get us to the start line, the sort of analysis that we're doing. In other words, how do we live with this annual report once you guys are prepared and once, Fiona, you've given us an unqualified opinion. Thank you. We'll take it now. It's then that the analysis starts, actually, Tony, in the way that you've said, Liz, are we happy with where we're at? But we need to make certain, and again, I want to be crystal clear, my support, Baz, for Karina, yourself and the team for being committed to transparency and honest transparency. So I don't think there's any other, I don't think you can qualify transparency by putting honest in front of it, but I will use that word as well because I get that here too. Josh, same for you as well. Thank you. Look, Baz, I do have quite a number of sort of minor details. I'm not going to bore the meeting with them. I'd be very happy to catch up afterwards just to run through them. It wouldn't take long if you guys would like to. I've got one table which doesn't add, by the way, according to my mental maths. But I'll probably sit down with you and try and describe why it's out of balance, and you'll say, but it is in balance, in which case I'll owe you a chocolate fish. But anyway, there we go. That's fine. Thank you for that. I've probably got my key point out, and thank you for entertaining me with it. Is there any other comment now that folk would like to make as far as this is concerned? We're going to go thrash. Thank you. I will look forward to the complete document. So, members, just to remind us that along with the hard yards that Fiona and Karina are doing, we will have essentially the financials on the 23rd of September to sit down and deal with, and then we will have to bring it all together on the 25th. So all power to the team as they leave, and get on with that work. Fiona, just a wee bit of agenda stuff. We do have your paper, which in lots of ways we've got in PX. I'm just conscious of your time and hours are important. Do you need to see us later on in PX, or can we let that one ride? Brilliant. Okay, members, that just reflects the paper we have in PX, but largely we've covered here. Do you have a need to meet with Fiona in PX before? No. Okay, we'll make a change. Thank you. Thank you. That's good to know. If need be, we'll come and call you. Thank you, Fiona. Appreciate that. Rightio, if we can, actually we better pass a couple of motions on this one, please, shouldn't we? I'm trying to go over. So if we could look to receive the report, we note the timetable, which I've reinforced, and we note the feedback from the workshop held last week. Thank you, Tony, and has been and presented at the committee along with our conversation. Is the person prepared to move that? Thank you, Liz. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. If you could take your remotes, please, and vote, that would be great. Thank you. Way to go. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's good. Good move then, please, to, and this is, it gets us, keeps going on with it, I'm going to say heavy. I don't think heavy is quite the right word, but it's blinking good stuff that we've got coming. That's right. That's a word I'll take it. Was I thinking of brutalist architecture? I don't know. Shamika, Beth, lovely to have you guys here. Thank you. Now, Shamika, you're known to the rest of the committee. I've had the privilege of meeting you, but I wonder, are you a new face? Okay. Yes, I'll leave it to you to introduce Shamika, and perhaps Shamika just to give us a wee bit of background. That'd be lovely.
Kia ora all. Very, very happy to introduce Shamika Manilao, who's our new Principal Advisor Risk Management, who is taking the work we've done to date and really put a rocket in it. And so we're starting to move, which is really, really great. So she's going to introduce the report. And as Bruce said, if you could give a wee intro, that would be awesome. And then we're open for questions.
Welcome, Shamika.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to be here today. So today we've got for you the revised strategic risks for Wellington City Council that we recommend you approve for us to adopt. So just a wee bit of background. These strategic risks are the output of a workshop that was attended by elected members in June. So we've collated the voting and the feedback from that workshop where individual members voted, and as well as some written feedback that we've received outside of the workshop, and we've put that together here. Key themes from the workshop that we want to make sure are reflected in the revised strategic risks in this paper are Wellington City Council's social license to operate, and then the impacts on public trust and confidence. So we really want the revised strategic risks to capture any uncertainties that may impact us achieving those objectives. So we've got those here for you today. What else? So as part of the strategic risk adoption process, our next steps will include developing a work program to ensure that we embed these throughout the organization, and approval of these will really sort of work as a critical enabler and a catalyst for us to be able to progress that work program, if you will, in a coherent and structured manner, and starting at the right point. If committee chooses to not approve the strategic risks, that will delay our progress a little. There are other aspects of the work program we can progress on, but it will mean that we can't do so in such a structured manner. So perhaps I'll leave it there for now and open up for any questions. Is there anything you want to add?
Thank you. I think I've got Rebecca first, then Tony.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is very good work, actually, and I want to commend it. I think it's extremely useful. The one that still sort of doesn't sit comfortably for me, and I don't want to in any way underplay it as a significant issue, extremely important issue, but health and safety, it just does not sit like those other risks to me, and so I'm just kind of raising a question mark. Any kind of advice around that? It is the one that sort of doesn't seem to fit for me.
So my understanding of the feedback or the discussion that went on in the workshop there is that while health and safety in most cases is deemed more operational in nature, our elected members did decide to include this on the strategic risk register, and the reason for that is that it was deemed so important that if the risk were to eventuate, or the worst case scenario were to eventuate, it would have an impact on Wellington City Council's ability to achieve its strategic future direction. So yes, while in theory it is more operational in nature, it's almost what you would call a critical operational, and so it's on the strategic risks.
Checking in that people are comfortable with it staying there, because it's, to me it doesn't sit there, but if the advice is.
Through you, Chair. We had a really good conversation about this, and we agree it's not strategic in nature, but because it is a critical operational risk, we're happy to include it in the package, and particularly because this council's focus and ongoing endeavours to grow health and safety maturity at the governance level is also incredibly important.
What I just want to emphasise is very important to me as well. I'm not downplaying it. Thank you.
Before I pass over, Tony, one feature, Rebecca, that I'm comfortable with and is used elsewhere would be to probably change the title, not the title, but the health and safety to, it's got SR10, would be OR1, Operational Risk 1, and that reflects that I'm reflecting another major metro I chair. We have 3 operational risks that fit exactly what you folk have just discussed, which is there are some operational risks which are largely operational in nature but are significant. I know I'm mixing my words there now, aren't I? But we would, there are 2 or 3. In the case of that council, service delivery, capital delivery is a OR risk, if you will, as in contrast to a strategic risk. But that's for what it's worth. So I think we're probably agreeing, Rebecca. It could be that's an offering from me.
I think it would be useful to sort of clarify our taxonomy and where things sit moving forward.
Yeah. And as a committee, we there is broadly the officer responsibility, which does also include elected members. So there's a sense to which this needs to be in front of this committee. But I think we're also knowing that we're pretty comfortable. You're always as comfortable as the next accident, but you're comfortable generally with where we're at, but it's still one that we need to maintain an eye on. So thank you for that, Rebecca. Tony.
Yes, you mentioned there was some post-workshop feedback from councillors. What was that, and did that change, what impact did that have on the strategic risks?
So it wasn't necessarily post workshop feedback. There was a councillor who couldn't make it to the workshop, and they sent an email. So we've taken all of that into consideration as well as part of pulling this paper together.
Okay. And lastly, I'm just conscious that this council's term is ending. When will a new council have an opportunity to review and revisit the strategic risks?
So I guess good risk management practice, which is what we want to continue to embed as part of our risk program, would result in a review of the strategic risks, regular review of strategic risks, to make sure that you're always sort of horizon scanning as to what could affect you. And other organizations I've worked at, that's sort of done every 12 months. So we'll need to see what works for the new council that comes in and the regular review. But in my experience, there is very rarely a perfect set of strategic risks. You just want to keep moving in the right direction. And so I believe that that's what these are. And when we review them again, they will be more and more reflective of the sort of current strategic context.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, a strong recommendation from me, because of course, I make the joke I go out of business on the 11th of October, would be that I'm keen that the new risk committee picks this up quickly, because we are again, I'm deeply appreciative of, I love the diagram. If you go to page, whatever it is, 314, there is the roadmap of the next steps. There are some broad dates around that, but we actually are only at a foundational level here by assuming that we adopt these this morning. We haven't yet, in effect, from a governance perspective, and I want to mix my words here, operationalised it yet. And that really requires the risk appetite aspects to be brought into play. So, I mean, to me, Tony, that's mission critical once the new council is in. What does that mean in terms of time? You're not going to do it before December. But I would hope, Andrea, if I had any influence, that before the end of the year there is a level of discussion. That second workshop needs to happen, basically. I mean, it would have been ideal but having said that, we are where we are. So I'd be very keen that we do that Decemberish, if that's possible. Does that match your thinking, Tony? Yeah, thank you. Iona.
Thank you. Two little comments and questions. First of all, can we just get rid of the man-made in relation to climate change? While I accept that probably it is mostly men causing it, I just hope we don't use that kind of language anymore.
Well said, Iona.
Yeah. Women are contributing too. But more substantially, can I just make sure that I've read this right? In the last lot, we had inadequate climate change response as the original risk. It's now been put as asset and service resilience and response. And for me, that does look like we're watering down the climate aspect a little bit. And it's not just about resilience, it's about mitigating it in the first place. And that seems to have disappeared.
If I may respond?
Yeah, thanks.
So just going off what was recorded in the workshop feedback. So yes, 100% correct. We did have inadequate council response to climate change. That got represented across two of the new strategic risks which are proposed for your adoption. So that's SR1 and SR2. Completely agree that we need to think about what can be done to mitigate, or to control, and what can be done to mitigate. So both sides. And that's sort of the earlier mitigation response is captured by SR1, where we have the inability to effectively understand and respond. So it's sort of the understand is more the how we control before, and then the respond is what we do where we can't and what we do after. Just on the comment of man-made or natural disruptive events, just wanting to highlight that in the original risk, there was man-made or natural disruptions.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but it should still go. Sorry. Look, I get your point, but my concern is that we have watered down the language. Like, we actually are not mentioning climate change. So it's talking about significant external environmental, political, economic, or legislative shifts. That doesn't highlight how important the climate change is, and that's just factual. It's not a political point. I'm just wondering, is it possible to put a few words in there about climate change?
Yeah, Councillor Pennant, through you, Chair. I think the intent is certainly there, and so I don't see any harm in just putting a couple of words in to reinforce that point. And without kind of undermining the point that you're making, I think for us that was an editorial change because that's always what was intended. So we would be happy to make that change. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Iona and Andrea. I would endorse that too if we can reflect that, because it actually also sets us up then for, in my view, monitoring a broader response to climate in part, and it's only in part, through the increased disclosures we're having in our annual report around greenhouse gases, for instance. So that would become important, because a critical part ultimately around these measures of around these risks are, well, how do we measure whether in fact we're getting better or worse? And climate change effects will be an important part of, I would hope, how we measure whether the risks around SR1 and 2 are getting better or getting worse. Thank you. Any other questions or comments folk would like to make on the strategic risks? Groovy. Oh, that's good. I was in the... Pardon?
Groovy.
Oh, sorry. Oh. Brutal, groovy. What other word can I use today? It always comes in threes. I'll find another word before the meeting's over.
We'll go with excellent.
Okay. Look, the motion is that we approve the strategic risks, and look, I won't include it, but I think if we can just reflect, there has been some they're significant, but they are editing comments around climate change, which you will get in there. And we note the elected members will be briefed on the work to update Council's risk appetite. Well, we're being briefed. We don't have a time, do we, Beth? But you've got some indication from me to the extent that I influence these things, what my expectation would be. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this, please? Thank you, Tony. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Rebecca. Can you please, no debate, can I ask you to please take your remote and vote, please? There we are, got it. Thank you, everybody. That's passed. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you, Shamika. We'll look forward to seeing more of you along the way. And Beth, thank you as well. Actually, can I just, before you guys go, can I just reflect? This was one of my must-delivers, Beth, before the end of the triennium. And it's actually, while it's a simple resolution, actually it is actually very important for a risk committee that it has a set of risks in there. So thank you for your personal effort along with your team, and I look forward to us getting this in a running form, which is great. Thank you. Righty, can we move please to where are we up to? Internal audit. G'day, Murray. I think Andrea is going to lead off on this one, but welcome to the meeting, Murray. It's good to see you back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, koutou. So apologies from Yana and Jim. Yana's away today and Jim is unfortunately sick, so I'm introducing this paper. Firstly, just wanting to acknowledge Murray and the work that they've been doing in our internal audit program. It's going exceptionally well, and really pleased with the work program and the relationship that we have with Grant Thornton. They test and challenge us appropriately, but we're also working together in a really professionally collaborative way as well. That said, as part of the scoping of any internal audit program, as the work gets scoped, you highlight whether or not what's in the program is appropriate or not, and Grant Thornton are recommending a change, and it's appropriate that this change comes through this committee as to whether or not you agree to the change. We are certainly wanting to maximise the assurance that we do get as council, and where there's other pieces of work to get that assurance, we're looking at where we can maximise the value that we get from our internal auditors in other areas. So I'll hand over to Murray.
Thank you. The proposal we've put forward is that the PCI DSS, which is the compliance with the rules set around credit cards, and the storing of data from credit cards. Every time you take a credit card, there's a whole bunch of personal and private information, and also obviously payment information. And so there's rules which you have to comply with, which are enforced actually via the banks, interestingly enough. So that is actually being done for the council by Bastion Security. So they have a 3-year program, and they have been and had a look at what the where the gaps might be, and made a series of recommendations which the team are following up on, working through. So they'll keep going through. So our piece of work in the program is a straight duplication, so we're proposing to remove that, which seems pretty logical. We've identified 3 potential internal audits. The reason we picked these 3 is primarily around the relative size of these pieces of work. We've identified delegated authorities, fraud, risk assessment or privacy. The delegated authorities is actually quite a big piece of work. It goes across everything that the organisation does, because people are signed out of every particular level. We are covering this ground to a degree in the sensitive expenditure. work, which is probably where most of the issues lie. The big decisions usually have very strong delegations worked around them. It's the small decisions which are often problematic. So we wouldn't propose putting that one forward. Fraud risk, as was just covered off in the previous item, the risk management process is getting reinvigorated. Fraud risk is looking particularly at the elements of the organisation where fraud might be prevalent. We are covering a lot of this ground through the work on financial controls, payroll, ITGC, cash handling, and of course sensitive expenditure. So we're covering a lot of that ground, which are the controls. The fraud risk would be looking at, it's partly an education piece to let people understand where fraud can happen, and it's partly also just checking where those controls are actually sitting. So again, I don't think that is as vital. Privacy is a problem for every organisation in New Zealand at one level or another. A report was done by an organisation called Information Design, which went through and made a series of recommendations. I think it's a 2022 report. So what we're proposing to do is basically twofold. One is to see where the recommendations are gone, and the other is to look at the maturity of the privacy processes as we'll compare those to the government privacy framework to get a perspective on where you're sitting across that. So that's the proposition before. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. So I've got Iona first.
Thank you. Just the delegated authorities, I was just wondering about that point. I know you're going to be doing some of the work, but what's left over? And how much risk does that expose us to?
Thank you for me, Chair. That's a very good question. I'm not sure off the top of my head because it kind of depends on how problematic delegations are. What we've seen through the work we've done so far is the big ticket items are well controlled. The delegations are understood and we're complied with. The issues we've found are more at the sensitive expenditure, sort of the expense claims, that sort of thing, where there's a informality in the process as compared with any particular problem. So we are proposing to do this work next year as compared to this year. So it's really a question of do we pull it forward. But in terms of the residual risk, I don't think it's huge. But of course, it's the committee's internal audit program. So if that's one you want to see in, please put it in.
So, sorry, talking about informality around expenditure might raise a few alarm bells in some quarters. So you're saying that we will make that more formal next year, is that right?
No, sorry. Well, next committee meeting, we're actually presenting some internal audit reports, which I'm quite looking forward to. One of them is sensitive expenditure. The informality I'm talking about is we have a table in there that says we have a sample of a couple of hundred, he says off the top of his head, of expenditure items which could be considered sensitive, which is any transaction with person has a personal as well as a business benefit. Classically, taking a contractor out for a cup of coffee, for example. Well, that happens in my world. So what we found was that initially, when our first blush through the system, there didn't appear to be adequate support, but when we dug into that and we went and actually searched the documentation, it was all there. So it's informal in terms of people aren't complying completely with policy, but it is actually being done.
So I think, can I just jump on that? I think you're partly revealing what you're going to bring on the 25th. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sorry, Chair, but I don't want to take the excitement away from the next meeting, obviously.
What I'm trying to reflect here, Murray, is actually the importance of Iona's question. You raised the issue of sensitive expenditure, but in fact, you've done the work. You're bringing a report that we'll have a chance to see at our next meeting.
That's correct, and it's a piece of work we're repeating this year. We're trying to understand whether the behaviours are changing.
Great. Okay.
So that's fine, Bruce and Murray. We just need to be careful about language because when people hear sensitive expenditure, they expect it to be done to a high standard. Thank you.
And can I just note, Councillor, just for the record, I have reviewed that work, and it's up to me as the Chief Strategy and Finance Officer to provide a management comment on that particular report. I have done it, hasn't been finalised yet, but I completely accept the findings, and I think there's a process that we as a council need to go through to make sure things are tidier and filed in the right place. That's the key finding, and very committed to working on that action as a result.
Thank you, Iona. Do we have any other questions for Murray or Andrea here? Okay, so we're getting more bang for our buck in the sense of Bastion are doing their work on work that we thought we would ask you to do, Murray. We don't have to because they're doing it, so we've got the ability for it. I'm comfortable that the privacy issue is one that is really important. I think we all remember that information by design review that had to happen and the reasons why. And as you say, it's 2 or 3 years ago. So I think a follow-up makes a lot of sense from my perspective. So that makes it sound like I better move the motion that we not only we note that Bastion will do their bit, and indeed we include the privacy by information. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Liz. Is there any discussion? There being none, can I ask you to take your remotes, please, and vote? Pardon? Do folk need a break? Keep going. We need a break? Or have we not? Oh, you're right. I pressed my button. Does that not? There we are. I've pressed it now. Do folk need a break at this stage? Thanks, Murray. Appreciate that, man. We'll keep going. You want a break, Tony? Well, let's take a break for 5 minutes. Check your phones and grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. to the Ombudsman report. Andrea, who?
Gareth.
Oh, Gareth. Gareth, sorry, down there, speaking to it. Thank you, Gareth. Sorry, I got you with your mouth. I got you with your mouth full, didn't I? G'day, Gareth. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks, Bruce, for the welcome. First, I'd like to thank the staff of the Office and the Ombudsman for their thorough review and all council officers who participated in the process. The Chief Ombudsman has completed a comprehensive review of Wellington City Council's Lagoima practices covering September 2024 to June 2025. The review assessed leadership, culture, staffing, policies and performance. The final report issued in June includes 37 action points and one public recommendation to support continuous improvement. This was shared with councillors in early July. The Ombudsman acknowledged areas of good practice including our searchable decision register, proactive information release and mandatory training. However, they also identified improvements, particularly around how we communicate and the Lagoima decision. Council has accepted the finding and is actively implementing them. Despite the high demand during the review period, our commitment to transparency and timely public information remains strong. We will report progress to both the Audit and Risk Committee and the Office of the Ombudsman, with the first update to the Office of the Ombudsman due in September 30th.
I'm just going to add a couple of comments for the committee and just reflecting that it's always great to have a review of internal processes and being able to reflect on the recommendations. And I just wanted to acknowledge Gareth as a result, because this is Gareth's last Audit and Risk Committee.
Oh, right.
Gareth leaves us at the end of this week, and I just wanted to reflect on the maturity that the Official Information Act team has built over the last few years under Gareth's leadership, and my sincere appreciation for the way that Gareth conducts himself with diligence and integrity every single day, and has the it just carries the importance of transparency with him on a daily basis, and how grateful I am for him to be in the team and to instill that culture across his wider group as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Gareth. Appreciate that. It's always a challenging area to find the balance right, and obviously the Ombudsman has been challenging the sector as a whole about its practices, and I think this is a very useful report, and I think if that case it reflects well on the work that you've done, Gareth. So thank you. So, folk, do we have questions for Gareth or Andrea on this report? Iona.
Thank you. I'll just ask three for now, if you want, if that's okay, because there's quite a lot. And Gareth, I do just want to say thank you for your assistance. I have really appreciated your integrity when dealing with a particular matter, so thank you so much. So, Andrea, maybe it's more a question for you. The Ombudsman, who of course was still in the position of Wellington, New Zealand during this time, which I do note and I was a bit interested in, says that we should be taking more detailed minutes and notes of workshops, which I agree with, but I do think that poses quite a big administrative burden, and it will be difficult to avoid politicising. Do you have any reflections on that recommendation?
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor. I just wanted to note that during the review, Peter Boshier was actually the Ombudsman. John Allen did sign out the report because he stepped into the role, I think, in June. And so, in effect, the bulk of the work was undertaken during Peter Boshier's term. So just to highlight that. Look, I absolutely agree with the sentiment that you have expressed, Councillor Panner, in terms of getting the balance right between what is documented and within minutes and the administrative burden. And so really a key part of that, as alluded to in this report, is actually coming back to you with how we're proposing to I guess, address the recommendations, and some of those will be actually, we may not necessarily take on the full recommendation that has been made, but what are the lessons that we can actually learn? So there's got to be a balance in some aspect of this, and so we would look to bring back that advice and work through that recommendation.
Okay. I think what also I just found interesting about the report is that the Ombudsman really emphasises that responding to Lagoima and obviously meeting other statutory requirements is a core function of council officers, well, elected members too. Do you think, Andrea, that that is kind of, and maybe this is a question for Matt too, that that's really embedded in job descriptions so that people understand that they do need to spend quite a lot of time on this at times?
Yes, I'm quite confident that it is well understood that it's part of the role of all of our officers. I think probably what the Ombudsman reflected is there's more opportunity for us to remind Kaimahi of that responsibility. And I think that goes without, that's part of building a culture of integrity across a public entity, and that's something that we're really pursuing a bit more of, and really thinking about how do we do that? How do we remind everyone that it is our responsibility to be transparent with information and decisions. People go about their lives and work and they get caught up in the busyness, and it's about stopping and actually thinking about what are their obligations as a public sector employee. So I think there's a wee bit more that we could do to remind people.
Okay, and just last question for now. The Ombudsman seems to think too that notes of meetings should be done and released to when there's requests. I've certainly come across a couple of cases where that information would have been useful. Is that going to be done?
I'm not sure what the finding is that you're referring to, Councillor.
Oh, there was definitely a part. I mean, I can take this offline with you later, but definitely there was yes, you can provide written material like texts and emails, but actually the conversations that people have on the phone or whatever should also have some kind of record keeping attached.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say is that I have a great degree of confidence, and Gareth might have another perspective that he wants to raise, that when we're fulfilling Lagoima requests, the understanding that it is also the thought process that people have gone through is also part of the official information. And so those discussions do happen, certainly when fulfilling Lagoima requests.
Yeah, sometimes it's a balancing act in terms of, in terms of the higher risk ones where we're, full and fulsome decision-making, recording and that. In terms of some of those straightforward ones where the information's in public domain, we don't record the necessary mechanics around our decision-making, but we're definitely, as a team, taking on the Ombudsman's recommendation to ensure that we keep full records of our, Lagoima decisions and that, so...
Do you have another question, Iona? I think you had three.
I have quite a few, so maybe other people would like a turn.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Iona. Rebecca.
Yeah, this kind of question came to me actually when Councillor Panek was asking your first one, and that is about recording public participation and details of public participation, because I'm very well aware that I'm thinking of an example where we had one issue where we had a public participant come to nearly every meeting who had a very strong view on a particular issue that was in no way reflected by any of the other engagement that we did, and that just to kind of express a concern, or are we thinking about it? Because if we were to put it at the beginning of every meeting minutes, it would essentially privilege that person who has the time and resource to come to every single meeting above the rest of the public?
Look, I absolutely understand the point that you're making, and it comes down to balance and judgment, and those are the types of things that we are very actively turning our minds to as we reflect on the recommendations. I mean, the recommendations are very much an absolute best practice, but sometimes you need to actually think about, well, what does this look like in actual practice, as it plays out, and they may not necessarily turn their minds to that kind of scenario that you've just articulated, where it could actually bias the sentiment, and so we need to apply these recommendations with the realities of what we experience. And so the really important thing here is not necessarily, in my mind, the number of recommendations or what it is about how we consider those and the advice that we provide back to you. And so that's the really important part of this conversation as an ARC is actually we've got this report and we'll come back to you with how we're thinking about addressing those, and for this committee or a subsequent committee, depending on the structure going forward, that they turn their mind to both the management and the external review, and that's the same with any internal audit report or any other report that you receive.
I've got Liz first, and
thank you. So that leads into the comments that I'm similar to what Councillor Matthews just said, but also what you've just said as well. I have some real concerns if you're going to be looking at minuting briefings and workshops, and essentially that's because it can then be used as a way of making a decision, which that isn't where you make the decision. And I've also starting to hear coming through debate and around the table now, I'm hearing elected members saying, well, we were told about this in the workshop. We talked about this. We said this in the workshop, and that's all very well, but that's not where you make the decision. And so that's what would be my concern if you were now going to look at it, as well as what Iona made, the resource of getting someone to actually do the minutes. But if you minute a conversation, then that's like an agreement or the beginning of a decision, and that shouldn't be what it is. And just to be clear, that's why I don't always I very rarely go to the workshops or the briefings, because I think that we get thorough papers that tell us that, and I'll only go if I really need to. But when you start to have people thinking that was where we talked about it, that I think is a risk.
Yeah, look, I agree, and I think there is a balance that can be struck. We do record most briefings, and actually if people want to go back and traverse what was discussed, there is access and availability for that information to be obtained. And so again, it comes down to, I think, what Councillor Pannett was pointing to is that balance of administration versus pragmatism, and what's the best way to achieve that. And again, that will be considered.
Thank you, Liz. Tim.
Thanks. Actually, I was just sort of reflecting on this report in the context of yesterday's decision over the City to Sea Bridge, which I felt was a review of council policies and also transparency, which obviously thoroughly endorsed the way council goes about both disclosing information and consulting with the public on that information. And I had two questions which in that context relating to this, and one of them is, was this inquiry undertaken as a result of complaint, or was it just sort of, because it feels to me, from what I've looked at it, that there's a little bit of somebody who's actually looking for problems rather than there is a problem which has been identified, which he's trying to explain. And so I just felt it was unnecessary. That was the first question. Yeah. Is there a problem been identified that this was actually...
No. So the answer to that is the Ombudsman has initiated reviews of certain local authorities. They've done that in tranches of 5, typically. So in the past, the likes of Christchurch City Council has been reviewed, Auckland Council has been reviewed. In this tranche, Wellington City, Marlborough District, Queenstown Lakes District Council, and 2 CCOs, which is new, so Auckland Transport and Wellington Water, were reviewed at the same time. Those reports are all available on the Ombudsman's website. So it to a certain extent, they would probably categorise this as a self-initiated random kind of review. That said, we're very open to reviews because actually we can take lessons and learnings from them. So we were really quite open to it. And it's not unhelpful to have those recommendations for us to turn our mind to it. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll be implementing them all. I have read albeit briefly, like very quickly in some cases. Gareth might have a view. All 5 reports. Wellington Water's report was released later, so but I would say for the 4 that were released together, you know, there was similar levels of finding across all 4, you know, and it reflects probably, is there an ability to tighten up certain aspects of policy or process as opposed to any fundamental flaw? And that's how I'd categorise those 4.
And thank you. The one other question I had was that did it take into account the cost as well as the benefit? I mean, because obviously transparency is all very well, but taking minutes and recording everything and blah, 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 but it sort of adds a whole other layer of bureaucracy.
I don't believe that they did. I believe they looked at good practice, and I think our role is to consider that cost benefit and actually provide that in recommendations to council to make sure that you're taking the appropriate cost benefit analysis, and that's the importance of having a management commentary alongside any kind of external review.
Thanks, Seth. Tony.
Thank you, Gareth, and I'm sorry to hear that you're moving on. I think you are a real asset to the team. Just in terms of talking about cost, I was wondering if you could explain, maybe in your own words, what is the cost of providing all these Lagoima requests, you know, from your team and from the council, maybe not just in terms of maybe of straight money, but also in terms of your rough estimate of the hours that go into doing this effort?
Well, there's definitely a cost, but you've got to balance that in terms of, is this the right thing? And transparency is important, of course. In terms of probably the way I would approach this, my team is 8 individuals who work really hard across the organisation to balance rising demands from our community in terms of it's getting harder and harder to do this work, I found, because the tide has turned and that we have seen a real rise in terms of requests that we receive, be it probably from cost of living, LTP that was going on. And so during the period to which we were examined at a difficult time, I would say. But yeah, from Lagoima touches officers in many ways. It also touches elected members, so there's no real straight line costs that I can give other than we have a team dedicated to answering this, and we rely on working across the business to kind of like help us to succeed. But I think, you know, I really value the work that my team does, and they do a really good job, and they're really committed to that. So,
thank you. And just in terms of the support you get from staff, you know, have you got any particular comment about how the teams out there, and maybe at the risk, because you're leaving, perhaps you could be a little more straightforward about how the ELT, also what commitment they have to make in terms of Lagoima responses?
Well, I've been doing this role for a very long time across the sector. Previously to here, I was in central government, so I've probably been doing this job for... that's why I don't have here, I would say, so for too long. But in terms of the maturity, I think the report speaks for itself that, you know, there are pockets of good, there's pockets of where we can improve, and I think we're consistent with some of the organisations out there in central government where, you know, they're at the, you know, we deliver what we say, those 400 plus services. So some of those real operational arm organisations, which have probably, yeah, I'd say lower maturity in terms of from the grassroots, I would say, from in terms of understanding what official information, because, you know, sometimes we're dealing with like a swimming structure or something like that probably don't touch like official information requests that often. But in terms of the more that you go up the organisation, you see that they understand what Lagoima is, and they understand that it's important to, in terms of, you know, transparency and our commitment to building public trust and confidence with our community. So I think, like, yeah, I think it varies in terms of degree, in terms of who you can talk to. But there's always help at hand when people need to know what it is.
Yeah, and one last thing, you know, Wellington City is a large council and always in the media spotlight, including with Lagoima. Do other councils, do you get contacted by other councils or organisations about how you do this Lagoima thing? And, you know, do you think that's actually where does Wellington City fit in terms of how our team, how our team's activities, are mature, somewhat mature, or are leading, by default, or just because we're seen as having some strengths in this area.
There's a whole Lagoima network in terms of local government that's committed to, a practice, community of practice, I would say. So it's an email network that goes out. So they do understand in terms of requests that are going out across the sector that, it's kind of balancing ideas or how they're approaching it. So there's that network, but then also from myself, I collaborate with my large metro, so Auckland and Christchurch. Regularly we have a quarterly session where we just sit down and talk about how are you feeling, how are you balancing this work. So I think there's that collaboration I see with my large metro friends is fantastic, because they are seeing the same problems or same situations that we are seeing, that this work is hard, and that how can we best balance in terms of our commitment to building public trust and confidence in the work that we do.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your work.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Gareth. Iona, you probably had a second set of questions you'd like to ask.
Oh, yeah. Maybe even a third, Bruce, with your tolerance, sorry. Maybe I need to have a talk to Andrea offline. So, Andrea, those tables where staff gave their opinions on whether councillors and ELT were committed to the Lagoima and transparency, I was just wondering if you could provide a bit of response. It would probably be unfair criticism to say, oh, we don't care, because people may just not know what the particular view is. But those stats were quite high. There wasn't a lot of confidence.
Yeah, so look, Councillor, I think probably I'd reinforce the earlier points that I made. I think when you're not talking about something, it's not front of people's mind, and I think we've got more to do as an organisation, and that's right across the organisation, to talk about matters of integrity, which includes transparency of information, to talk about, how we do things around here. And I think that that's something that the executive leadership team has been and will continue to be committed to. I think one thing that I'd reflect is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day and we forget that these reminders are actually really important. So I think my reflection is that it's more a lack of visibility as opposed to a lack of existence, if that makes sense.
Okay. Maybe for discussion offline. The need to more clearly identify the public interest and the harms that are created by excluding the public from meetings. I presume you will have a careful look at the process around that. There's quite a lot of discussion there.
I think we always take a very careful look at what is in PX versus anything else, and the principle that we have always had here at Wellington City Council is that things are in public unless there's a very, very good reason to put in PX. And I think we demonstrated that more recently with the sludge discussion, where we navigated that discussion very carefully when we were talking about a commercially sensitive topic. So we very much canvassed that. I think the main things that we do discuss in PX are the appointment of certain individuals to boards, etc. There is good reason to do that, but we're always very transparent post the event around the decision that has been made.
Okay. The point around reputational risk, that people are maybe self-censoring a little bit because of what might end up in the public, and the Ombudsman is really clear that that's not a ground for denying any information as well. Do you accept those points?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and maybe just the last one for now, because we are limited for time this week. Just around challenging requesters, I think that was the terminology used. again, there's a balance there, isn't there? Because it can take a lot of time and money to do broad requests, but nevertheless, the Ombudsman's really clear that people do have the right to ask. So you'll refine the process around that a little bit, will you?
Yeah, look, it's always a case-by-case basis, councillor. There's a really important discipline here. People have the right to request information, and the team will always give regard to every single request that comes through. However, as with many things in this council, there are people that can be disrespectful. There can be people that can be dismissive. There are people that can take aim at council staff for decisions that have been made to elected members. And therefore, there's a really important obligation on myself and all other members of ELT to ensure that our staff are not put in that situation. And so there are some times where, like we have to work through that process. And unfortunately, we are getting more and more of those types of requests. And that is just not right, and it's just not fair. And so there is an absolute balancing act. I am very confident that the team will continue to look on all of these things on a case-by-case basis. We have had the Ombudsman come back to us on certain decisions that we have made and question those, and I have been very clear going back to them that I am confident and will stand behind the decisions that my team have reached and the team at Wellington City, because people have been vexatious or have not been professional in their communications with us. It's up to the Ombudsman then to make their ruling, but that is something that I am very, very passionate about.
Thank you, Iona. Tony, you've got a final question.
Yes, I mean, it was really going back to getting a balance of the record right. I know that the fact that we have all of our meetings, all the public parts of our meetings up on YouTube is a great resource. That means people can proactively go and find out what's happened. But I was just really wondering in terms of my work going back in terms of public excluded meetings, I've often struggled to understand and remember what happened, particularly around the votes. And I was just wondering whether it would be possible to consider a change such that by default we would do a division on public excluded meeting votes, except of course for those votes that are about personal appointments, which I don't think is necessarily appropriate.
Jennifer's going to respond to that one.
Kia ora, Councillor. So any committee members are welcome to do a division just, as you would under any normal circumstances, and councillors can see the votes of any public excluded item through the portal.
Okay, well, I mean, all I'm saying is rather than, because, when we don't do a division, we can still see what the votes are in public. And it was just notable that we've had some decisions where we haven't done, looking retrospectively, where we haven't done that in public excluded, where some of the most important decisions are made, and there's no record of that vote in the minutes or extracted. So, if the advice is that we can't do that in standing orders, then I guess we just have to do divisions all the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you'd just be able to request a division just as you would normally. So it's just the same practice.
Okay.
Thank you, Tony. Gareth, again, look, thank you. There's been lots of plaudits your way for the work you've been doing. I just would like to probably finish with one or two questions. And given it's an officer of Parliament that's reporting, his habit, there's a his and he, isn't it, is to have an opinion. So obviously, given my background, I went to the opinion. And I just wonder if you could, well, actually, one very interesting comment. He does try and get balance. And I think, you've already received, was an award, I don't think there's any reward for it, award for the Matapori initiative. And he's drawn reference not to the award, but to the fact that that's really important. I noted there's 37, well, we've been saying recommendations. He actually says suggested actions. So can I just check? You are probably already taking those 37 suggested actions, and your first step is to consider whether you consider them valid and you want to implement them. Is that correct?
Yes, so of course we're focusing on the public recommendation around Lagoima decision making, which we have now implemented and completely changed or done. So yeah, and the next phase is, like I mentioned at the beginning, is the 30 September update to the Ombudsman, which will just basically signify whether we've started, completed or in progress of some of those recommendations. So as a management team we'll have conversations around that report, and that's probably the first basis to understanding and kind of mapping out our journey to succeeding in this.
I noticed he talked about areas of vulnerability, and I was interested in the word vulnerability. Do you know what he means by that?
Yeah, I think it's around...
is that consultant speak back?
Probably. I think it's you can do a little bit better. So it is around, that the Ombudsman, like you said, is an officer of Parliament. They have, their expectations around how the Lagoima applies, and I think that's their standard to which they are identifying that's something that we could probably do a little bit different to succeed on.
Yes, I guess the vulnerability is that we're open to challenge if we went to address the issue, which would be fine. Okay, so fine. So you've received the report, Andrea. You've essentially accepted the findings. We're in a process now of implementation. You've said you'll bring back progress to this committee as you go through it. That makes good sense. It's part of the insurance package that we can have around. Tough area actually, but as you've said, it's doing the right thing as a local authority, as a public entity, which is great. Okay, I think that has got us to the end of that. Thank you for again, Gareth. You're going with the plaudits of this committee for your good hard yards over a good number of years, and thank you very much. Appreciate that. We simply are going to receive. Rebecca, you going to move? Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, can I speak very briefly just to say that I actually found this report very reassuring, and I think from what I've seen of some of the other organisations' reports, even more so, and that I think it's a useful process that gives us things to work on, but actually shows that there is good practice in our organisation, and so I think that feels like a positive reinforcement of the work that we're doing, and some pushes to do more in certain areas that we do need to kind of take some balance off. And I guess I just wanted to note the difference between the perception of some members of the public and the reality, and that there is a difference, and that maybe that means we need to be more proactive about how we're sharing what we do. Because I think what we do, I think we are very open and transparent as an organisation. So yes, thank you everyone.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think we're lining up. Iona, I think you would like to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. So look, I'd like to thank the Ombudsman, and I'd like to thank staff for accepting the recommendations. I think the point that's really made clearly through this report by the Ombudsman is that we're doing some things really well, but there are some room for improvement, and we need to take this issue of complying with the law really seriously. And so it's always good when an organisation can hear some feedback in a non-defensive way. I really appreciate that. I guess as someone who has actively worked on this issue, I do think there is still a bit of a way to go. So we're going to have a debate on Thursday, which I don't understand why is in PX. And so there'll need to be some discussion about that when we can do that in public. And I think also around the Lagoima practice, that there probably is still some space to be able to be really, really clear that we will be as transparent as possible, including recording discussions, particularly when they are sensitive matters. I can think of a few cases where that would have been helpful to have had that information. But look, it's always an ongoing process, and so it's good to know we're doing some things well, and we hopefully got a roadmap for going forward in doing even better. Kia ora.
Thank you. Tony.
So thank you for the report and the feedback, and also thanks to the team. In my comments, I want to separate off the team and the process and the attitude and culture of the council from the content of what we're dealing with. And, because while there's crossover, I've always thought that one of the very best things about Wellington City Council is its commitment to transparency. It's a commitment that is often hard to apply, but I think the team with Gareth works very, very hard, and the council works very, very hard, and some of the practices such as an early adoption of proactive release, the early adoption of not only providing live videos of meetings, but also workshops, and also now the proactive release of all the decisions. The council gathers a lot of information, and it makes a lot of it available where it can. And that's not just in Gareth's team, but the wider council democracy services. The council works very hard to be a leader in this, and it's hard work. And I do thank all of the council. We have our challenges, and certainly during this triennium we've had challenges, for example, around the issue of elected member access to information, where we sometimes struggled as elected members to get information because of trying to get a good process that would balance the needs of officers to do their work with the rights of elected members to get at governance. But we're working through that, and I certainly appreciate in all those discussions that it's been a very open discussion about what the process should be, even if the decision is wrong. And I do want to take also to note that I've been involved with some Lagoima processes, and I've sometimes disagreed with the decisions of council, but I have always tried to respect the process, and in the end, the council officers are responsible for making the decisions, and when they do that, that needs to be respected, even if you think it's wrong. We have a really good attitude, and while I believe the reason why we get so many Lagoima requests is because some of this council's decisions are not taking the public with them, which generates a lot of work when people who object, sometimes on some issues, perhaps a majority are objecting, they try and exercise that partly by trying to get more information about why a council made a decision that did not seem to be in accordance with public opinions. I think we've always tried to service that as well. I mean, that is part of democracy. And I again want to come back to the team, the process, and the culture, and say that while this council, in terms of some of its decisions may be controversial, that behind the scenes the council is always trying to be open, and that's been my experience, and that we have a good process, and that we're always open to even make it better. So good on you guys, and please thank all please reinforce that back to say that the openness, while it comes with quite a high cost and a lot of stress, we do want to maintain that, and I support you doing that. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Any final comments as the mover? Rebecca, you okay? No. Okay, the motion moved by Rebecca, seconded by Tony, is that we receive the report. Would you please vote? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That's great. We move to the final paper and open, which is just the sort of procedural pickup.
I'll take the paper as read.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. I did actually, Andrea, go back and check what were the unactioned items, but I'm comfortable that they're all in the process of coming through, and they will in due course, which is great. We know the rest, I think, is there. So I will move that we receive this information. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, John. Can you please take your remotes? Oh, Tony, sorry. Too quick. My mistake.
No, actually, no. I'll
Are you comfortable? Welcome to ask a question. No, you okay? Good. Can you please take your remotes, please, and vote on receiving the information? Thank you. Phew, I finally voted. Thank you very much for that. Right, if we could move to the motion to move into public excluded. Seems incredibly relevant given we just finished a discussion on the Ombudsman. I'm very comfortable for the reasons that we need to go into PX, so I'm going to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Liz. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'd ask.
Yes, sorry, it certainly is. Sorry, Bruce. Look, it's a little bit ironic. We've just talked about transparency. I'm not entirely clear why the second item needs to be in public excluded. There might be some argument around the litigation, although that should still be scoped up. So, yeah, I would really challenge that on the OAG. I just don't think there was anything sensitive there.
Oh, so sorry, Councillor. That is, we do consider that one, and because it is based on uninformed kind of like the audit is in progress. So the auditor has provided free and frank advice to you around the progress of the audit, and there is information in there that they want. To be able to have a free and frank conversation with the committee and provide that information. That is how we've treated that information.
And I would reflect, perhaps you might want to reflect on my process. And apologies that I don't know if you disagreed, but in effect, the matters that were covered in this paper were covered actually in public, which probably supports your argument. But I'm keen that we keep a placeholder in our agenda, as we should with our auditor. We were just trying to shortcut the process today, given the pressure that they and the finance team are under to get the annual report across the line. So I'm actually proposing when we get into PX, we do actually receive this paper, but I'm actually reflecting also that we've effectively discussed it. There's nothing literally in that one pager at this point that is relevant, more, that hasn't been discussed in public today. Right, thank you for that, Iona. Can I please invite you to vote on moving into PX, please? Oh, here we go. Brilliant. Yep, if we could just give me the tea and the nod that we can deal with essentially the one matter we have.